Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Veg Networking Canada, a community where vegan plant-based companies connect and collaborate. It is important to honor, acknowledge, and respect that many of us are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of many Indigenous peoples of Canada. Today, we have a very special guest with us. He is a controversial filmmaker and passionate entrepreneur, a champion for using visual information to help make the world a kinder place, all with a heightened interest in an ethical and compassionate future. Veg Networking Canada is pleased to introduce the owner of TerraLuv. Welcome, Gary Charbonneau.
Well, thank you for having me, and that's a very nice intro. I might use that again if you don't mind. And it's nice to be here with everybody. I'm guessing the one thing that people ask is obviously how long I've been vegan and what my story is. Is that what you'd like to hear right now?
Yeah, we'd love to hear more about your personal story.
I'm from Timmins, Ontario. It's a small little mining town. And growing up, there was very mixed messaging. You have those people who hunted and fished for sustenance, and there's a respect for animals. You use all of the animal, things like that. But then there was all these magazines that would give away gifts and prizes for the biggest fish or antlers. And so there didn't seem to be a respect there. So it was confusing growing up when I was very sensitive to see that animals could feel pain, they had emotions, and a lot of people they just seemed to ignore that. So I had a hard time kind of living in a place like that, where it was just basically hunting and fishing, and there was confusing messaging happening. But once I actually moved out of Timmins, and then I started to hear about factory farming, I didn't want to have anything to do with animal cruelty. So my philosophy was and has always been that if you don't have to hurt or kill another animal to survive, you shouldn't have to. So I've been vegan for about 25 years now.
Wow. Okay. And in terms of that, how does that parlay, if at all, into your entrepreneurial origin story?
I was an entrepreneur at a very young age. And so that didn't play a part until I really started to learn about the animal issues in Canada. And then it went beyond just eating. And so, you have entertainment, you have clothing and all of that. And so I had to bring my entrepreneurship into that realm of compassion because I just couldn't sleep at night. I'm vegan on one hand, but then I'm doing something else that's not supporting my philosophy. So once I started to look into businesses that were plant-based or organic, sustainable, I certainly felt a lot better, and I knew I was on the right path, which is why my entrepreneurship will include a company like TerraLuv, which is all vegan fashion, or my filmmaking documentaries on animals and things like that. So yeah, that's the direction I've gone into just naturally.
Wonderful, wonderful. So touching on TerraLuv for a moment, next question for you is, what are some transformations or trends, commonly known as, in your industry? And that your industry with TerraLuv is, ethical fashion, essentially. So what are some trends or transformations you spotted in that space?
This is a very unique and powerful time. Especially for people who want to venture into this type of field as an entrepreneur, just as a second job or something like that. Being vegan for 25 years, I've seen almost everything. And it's been interesting to watch how nothing happened for vegetarianism or veganism for the first easily 15 years. And then it started to change. Then we started to see a huge increase in trends and movements towards this kind of thing. And a lot of it came from corporations. What they did is they saw the opportunity for profit. They saw where the world was going. So when you started seeing vegan products in stores like Walmart and other big corporations, and you see Maple Leaf that's even bringing in vegans, they're the ones who actually help bring it to the mainstream. And so they're not cutting themselves off. What they're doing is they're basically transitioning to wherever the profits are. So they don't care if it's animals or not, but they actually helped in getting people to understand what that is. and helped the trend and the movement that was eventually going to happen, and which is why even now to get into a business, anything that's vegan, cruelty-free, plant-based, anything like that, sustainable, it's a great time because it's growing and more people are aware. The younger generation is much more aware than when our parents were. We're somewhat aware, but the next generation is really feeling the negative impacts of what we did. And they're just starting to really watch and learn and see what's working for them. So it's a great time to get into to business in any of these fields because they're all growing.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you mentioned your films. We'll get to that in a moment where we get into a question about resources, because one of those resources that a lot of people kind of mention are documentaries or films, and so you have some insight into that. So we'll kind of get back to that in a moment. But sticking with TerraLuv, the next question is about where is your brand going in the future? And some people might not, this might be the very first time they're hearing about TerraLuv. And so it's usually helpful if you can talk to us about, the start and then the path to where we are now today, and then using that as a springboard to answer this question, which is where's your brand going in the future?
So TerraLuv was actually Nice Shoes before I bought it. So Nice Shoes was in Vancouver for over 10 years it was run by Glenn and Joanne. They did a great job, really put together a community. There wasn't too many places where you can buy some really good quality vegan stuff. So it really became a niche for vegans here in Vancouver. Then when I bought the company last year, I closed the store down because it wasn't big enough to carry enough products. As I said, the industry is growing and I want to have more selection for people. So I decided to go online and change the name from Nice Shoes to TerraLuv because we're more than shoes now. Bags, purses, we're going to have clothing, all that kind of stuff. And we've got at least 3 times more product now with more coming. So now people have a large selection, which is great. It's a little inconvenient for some people because you can't try things on because they have to be mailed to you, but then you could always return them, and that's the way the future is going. Everybody ordering online now, and so for my brand is with the new name and the new direction with being online, I plan on expanding more, especially across Canada first and foremost, and then going into the US. And the first few years is going to be just going after vegans because they're looking for products. Once I've heavily marketed to vegans across US and Canada, then I'll go after the non-vegans because their products are excellent now. They're better than leather products now. So so I've got marketing plans for the next 5 years.
Awesome, awesome, great. 5-year roadmap sounds awesome. Now, in terms of a little bit of a curveball question, maybe you weren't expecting, but a lot of people who listen and engage with Veg Networking Canada are creative, right? They're vegans in a creative space. They like marketing. They like all of that. That is essentially putting your flag in the ground, being different, branding, marketing, and all that. So, long-winded way, is there a story behind the rebrand, behind TerraLuv? Does that mean something? Is there a story there?
There's always a story somewhere. But what you said is very interesting. I'm actually in a position where I might be looking at bringing on a marketer for what you're exactly talking about. Looking for somebody that's very passionate about going out there and talking about the fashion and the clothing and the shoes. And so I think I'm going to create the story as I continue because it's still very new to me and I'm still learning a lot about this. Meeting some wonderful people. It's been quite interesting actually, but there will be more of a story coming and more direction probably in the next 6 months.
Wonderful, wonderful. So in terms of charity and giving back, that means so many different things to different people, right? Like a lot of the time in the past, it was very much so transactional. It was dollars. That's what charity or giving back meant. Fast forward to today, a lot of people are looking at investing their time and their resources on being on different boards and this and that and the other thing. So with that being said, whether it's for you personally and or with TerraLuv or even your films, and we'll get to that again in a moment, do you have a strategy as it relates to giving back or charity?
Yes, actually, I support a few charities in Canada. There are some charities that I don't support fully because I don't think that they're run properly. I think a nonprofit business is still a business and it has to be treated as such. And a lot of nonprofits, they're trying, but they're not at the professional level. And so they're always struggling. And then it's the animals that end up suffering. So I'm very cautious. You're gonna get me in trouble with this question. This is what's gonna happen. But uh, for me personally, what I want to do with TerraLuv is I want to reach out to volunteers who work for charities and give them prizes and accolades that they're not really receiving. Volunteers are so important, but they seem to be kind of left out a little bit more than they should be. And so I'm hoping to create a place on TerraLuv that every week we find the volunteer of the week that really should receive something, a gift or a prize, or just to let them know you're doing a wonderful job. Because the more we can get volunteers to participate and show them how much they mean and how much they're doing, a lot more people will also join. So I think for the charity part, that's kind of where I'm going to be going. And then I give gift certificates, fur bearers, animal justice, anybody who really wants a gift certificate, they can have them because I love animals. So yeah, that's kind of the gift certificates, and volunteers are kind of the route that TerraLuv will be taking.
Yeah, you mentioned fur bearers and animal justice. A lot of people listening know and love those folks and everything that they have going on there. And you mentioned kind of like the volunteer victory square concept, which is very, very cool and different and definitely needed as well. And you're absolutely right. Nonprofit doesn't mean poor. And that it's just like a personal finance money mindset. Like that's got to shift in order to, so it's spot on there for sure. All right, so I think this is where at the beginning, right off the bat, controversial filmmaker, first three words of the intro of this today's episode. And so people are probably like, ooh, what does that mean? And so why don't we dive into that probably first? The question here is, what are some resources that you would recommend to others that have helped you in your journey? Resources such as books, podcasts, apps, websites, or documentaries. So let's hear more about what controversial filmmaker means in relation to you, Gary.
Well, just the term is probably just not being scared to go out and tell the truth. It's even when I was doing my last film, which was called The Medical Illusion, and it talks about the failures of testing on animals to understand human disease. There are so many doctors that they can't come out and tell the truth, and because they're not going to get a job, they're not going to get the grants. And so even as a filmmaker, if you're sponsored by CBC or something like that, you have to watch what you say. They'll edit it. And so if you're like me and you just put it out without any sponsorship or any backing or anything like that, I can kind of do what I want to do and say what I want to say, but then you get sued like I did. So you're taking a chance when you want to be a controversial filmmaker, but I certainly respect them because I know how hard it is. And I was public enemy #1 for a long time when I did the Vancouver Aquarium film, until people realized that my film was truthful. But for 6 months, threats and social media was lighting up, and it was you have to be strong. And so I respect controversial, not just filmmakers, anybody, whether you're singing songs, you're writing books, you're putting yourself out there. It's like the proverb, the nail that sticks out gets hammered. That's what we do. And sometimes we get hammered, but it's worth it.
So you mentioned earlier there's essentially like a lesson in everything. So if we could kind of just dig maybe a little bit deeper here, which will kind of lead into the next question, which is about inspiration. Sticking kind of on what you just mentioned, right? The nail that sticks out gets hammered. And this almost kind of touches on some tips, lessons, wisdom, advice, which is the last question. But is there what did you take from being public enemy #1, working through that, knowing that you were sharing the truth and others didn't think that you were, like, yeah, like just curious if there's anything that comes to mind when I say that.
What you do is it becomes the norm. That's what happens. You expect it. And so it becomes easier to do what you want to do, say what you want to say, because when you get attacked like that, after that, then you just know what's going to happen. And there's a lot of positives. The more I was attacked, the more people were talking about it. And it didn't really bother me at all. I didn't really care. I knew my film was truthful, and eventually people will learn that. So yeah, you just, like I said, it becomes normalized that anybody who's, like I said, controversial, you expect it and you just roll with it. That's what ends up happening. So
And
yeah.
that's how thick skin is born, right? I guess that's
I don't even have a thick skin, because thick skin still means that you have to protect yourself. This is like a breeze to me. It's like a warm breeze. It doesn't bother me. Let people say what they want. When you've been vegan for this long, I was ostracized for so many years. I'm used to it. I surround myself with people such as the people here. We're all like-minded, and it's like we know what we're doing is right, and everybody else is upset with us because they don't have the strength to do it. And so, we have our group, and our group is wonderful, very nice, conscious people, and it's great having conversations with people like everybody here, because we're all on the same page and we're all awake, which is, you don't get that very often when you're talking to people in the public generally, but we all know what it's like.
yeah, and everybody listening here too, speaking to them in terms of waking up or what have you. And I don't know if anybody else, when you said that, had like a visceral feeling like I did in terms of like a paradigm shift about transforming from thick skin to, oh, it's just a warm breeze. Like that's just extremely empowering and extremely powerful to move forward with in this space. Because you're right, even just flying the flying the vegan flag, comes with its perils, right? So
Yeah.
very, very interesting. So, all right, in terms of inspiration, another one of those things, it's just a big loaded question. So you can speak to it about if it's people, organizations, nature, sources of inspiration for you, and or more of a philosophical way of answering it is like, what does inspiration actually mean to Gary?
That's a very good question, because some people listening, and the people here, you'll understand. I've spoken to some people they've been at it for so long. We kind of get to this point where, when I first became vegan, we all do. We absorb everything that we can. We read books. We go to talks, watch documentaries, and then you get to a point where you just can't do it anymore. It overwhelms you with sadness, because a lot of them are just emotional, which is another reason. Like, if you watch my films, everything's fact-based and scientific. uh, Emotion doesn't really work well. It doesn't last long for people. They go see a film and they're emotional, they'll cry, and then they'll go home and have a burger because they'll forget about it. And so I'm more into facts and science, as evidence. But back 25 years, we're talking like Jane Goodall, Peter Singer, people like that. And then once I got my fill, I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, I can do what I can do. And then the only thing I'm interested in now is, as far as because people are always trying to send me information, and I don't have time to read it all or look at it. And a lot of it is just simply disappointing without really any direction to resolve it. Just saying, look at this sadness. Well, when you have some resolutions, talk to me. But I don't need any more sadness. I work full time trying to make a difference, and that's enough. And when it comes to 5 o'clock, it's my time, and I don't want to burn out. And I think that that's very important for us, for everybody listening. Don't burn yourself out. You have this guilt that you're never doing enough, but you have to pace yourself, and you have to stay healthy and remain positive. And that's by not overdoing it. And we tend to do that. I did. Everybody does it at first, till you realize that I'm not as happy as I could be, which my energy isn't there the way it should be, this positive, glowing energy. And then, but you learn. And so my inspiration came a long time ago. And after that, I look at people like Leslie Fox and Camille Labchuk, Dr. Chadu Chandrasekhara, Rebecca Breder. I mean, you've got some all-stars that they're up against the tide, and you just look at them and there's a lot of inspiration, and there's a lot of people, even your podcast and like the farming. I'd love to learn about how to do some more growing and vegetables properly and things like that. But yes, so that's my inspiration came a long time ago.
Yeah, it came a long time ago, and it's constantly stoked as well from some of the
Mhm.
folks that you mentioned and what they have going on as well. And so before we get into that final question here, somebody who's with us live here in the community asked to get back to one of the questions. Are there any other books, podcasts, or apps that Gary would recommend as useful resources?
I did see I think it was called Game Changer, the documentary. That was well done. That was a great documentary. I think that was one of the best documentaries I've seen that can really help you understand what this is all about. Um, as far as podcasts, I heard there's a great one from Justin Manning you should really listen to, and lots of books. Like I said, there, I can't even think of one right now. I've read so many of them, but I think it's really what you resonate with. And if you want to listen to books, if you want to read books, if you like I said, if you want to go to TED Talks, it's really what resonates with you. But yeah, there's just quite a few things out there for you to grab onto.
Awesome. And somebody else here mentioned there's a sequel to the Game Changers coming, which is
Excellent.
exciting. And
Excellent.
when it's important for us to remember that just because something like Game Changers or something else might be old news to whoever hears that, oh yeah, like, is there anything else that might be something that is exactly what somebody needs who hasn't heard it and or has, and then they just haven't heard it
Yeah.
until now. So that's great. All right, Gary. So last question. Some folks are totally comfortable framing this from the lens of, I have advice to give and I'm going to give it. Others like to kind of take a step away from that and more so from like these are the lessons I've learned or the tips that have helped me or the wisdom that I've garnered over my journey. And so that's the question based around tips, lessons, wisdom, advice. And again, you might be speaking to somebody like you who just bought a business. You might be speaking to somebody who does work a 9 to 5, but has a burning passion and is thinking of it. So you're speaking to like a wide swath of people, but just from your perspective, just shoot from the hip. Any tips, lessons, wisdom, or advice?
I think that we all go through the same evolutionary process. When we first become vegan, like I said, I think we've all done this. We want to tell the world, and so we can't be quiet about it. And people find us rather annoying and pedantic after a while. And then you start to realize that you're actually really turning people off because you're overdoing it. And so I have learned that the best thing for me is to just make my films and put them out there and then let people talk and discuss it and all of that. And I don't really push my veganism anymore onto anybody. I let people ask questions or see my lifestyle. And that seems to work much better. That's because then they're open to it. They're not being forced, not being feel bad. They're actually coming to you. And that's, I think we've all experienced that. And because you always see the newbies and they're full of energy and you think I used to be like that. And then so yeah, for me, as far as personally, as I said, I like doing my films and putting them out there, and then I get to stay behind the scenes and let people talk about it and things like that. And that's kind of more my style. Other people like to get out there with brochures. They like to do their protests, which one thing I guess I'll kind of say right now, I hope that the nonprofits across Canada that continue to do protests, that they update themselves. Going out there with a megaphone and always being angry and yelling, I don't think is very productive anymore. I think it would be nice to see calmer kind of events, family events, more information, more education, as opposed to anger. And I'd really like to see, like I said, an update across Canada. And it would be nice if some of the nonprofits, charities would actually work together. They'd have a lot more power, but we're a little bit behind in that area.
Wow, lots of just like looking at on this online format, we have hearts and head shakes and nods and all of that. So that definitely resonated with a lot of people who are here with us live and probably people who are going to be listening. And yeah, to your point, like we all have our own form of, I guess, activism, if you want to call it that. But yes, you're right. Me personally, I felt like I learned the biggest lie and the veil was lifted and I needed to, how did everybody not know what was going on versus taking a step back from that and just trying to share information, and letting people feel how they feel and not trying to project how they should feel. Right. So that's very interesting take. All right. So, Gary, incredible conversation. Before we let people know where to find you online and on Instagram, Is there anything in this conversation that has come up that you want to circle back to? Anything that was potentially missed? Anything like that? It's kind of just open floor for you right now before we give you your outro.
No, I think you've kind of covered everything. I've learned so much just from doing the films. If I can touch on that for just a few minutes, like I said, my first film was called Vancouver Aquarium Uncovered, and I I investigated, I guess you could say, the lives of cetaceans in captivity. So we did find out that the aquaria industry was not being truthful. They're not healthy. They're not happy. And this is worldwide. Um, but the evidence was so damning that the one question that kept coming up for me was, how did the aquarium get away with it for so long? And I was absolutely surprised at they were insulated. First of all, the media wouldn't say anything negative about them because the aquarium spent so much money in advertising. They told me they weren't writing about me because they're not going to bite the hand that feeds. And so that was like, I couldn't really get into media until I was sued by the aquarium. That's why a lot of people didn't know the truth. Tourism Vancouver also supported them when they knew that there was a problem. I came into contact with an email through a Freedom of Information where Tourism Vancouver sent an email to the Vancouver Park Board saying that there's a new documentary out, the Vancouver Aquarium Uncovered. People are concerned about the animals and the facts of this film. And they said, we're just letting you know, this is the email from Tourism Vancouver to the Park Board saying, we're just letting you know you're going to probably going to get some questions. So now we're going to contact the aquarium for talking points. They had no interest in talking to me. They weren't concerned about the animals. How do we deal with this and keep moving forward? So you have the media, you have Tourism Vancouver. The University of British Columbia allowed two of its professors to be dishonest about the aquarium. Two of their professors, it was kind of a quid pro quo agreement where they would do some research to enhance their position. And in return, they would say these things about the aquarium, about the cetacean program that sounded positive, but they were false. So when I contacted UBC and asked about their code of ethics, requiring them to prove that, UBC said to me that they weren't discussing this as UBC professors, but rather as individuals. So then I, in return, sent them an actual recording of one of their professors introducing themselves as a professor, then going on to say the statement and saying, here's your evidence that they weren't acting as individuals. UBC replied saying, the matter is closed. That was it. So now you've got universities that are allowing professors to support the aquarium, Tourism Vancouver, the media, corporations. They were so well insulated, the public had no clue. They have no idea. So, and then you have CCAM, I'm sorry, not CCAM, CAZA, I should say. CAZA is what appears to be the independent oversight for zoos and aquariums. CAZA stands for the Canadian Accreditation for Zoos and Aquariums. So here's another insulation that they have. So Canadians feel comfortable and safe that there's this external body called CAZA that is accrediting zoos and aquarium, making sure that they're looking after their animals properly. And when I saw what was happening at the aquarium, I thought, when was the last time CAZA here to accredit them? Because they shouldn't be accredited. So I contacted CAZA. The president of CAZA was the vice president of the Vancouver Aquarium. And all of CAZA was all zoo and aquarium personnel. In my personal opinion, CAZA is completely fraudulent and misleading everybody. So this is why zoos and aquariums, and then you get into my next film, The Medical Illusion, and you find out about, when you find out about how you get your drugs, it is absolutely, I will not touch a pharmaceutical unless I'm dying, because it is so scary and frightening how a pharmaceutical goes from animal testing to human clinical trials to you. This is why people die every single year from taking prescription drugs as prescribed by their doctors. And I can get into that whole story, but I think that's enough for now.
Okay, last final point. If you want to kind of get back to your films and perhaps speak to loving, caring, animal-loving parents who believe that non-human animal prisons, zoos and aquariums, are great for teaching. They're great experiences. Is there anything that you could say to them? Yeah, is there anything that you could say to them?
Oh, you mean about the education of having these animals in captivity? Is that the question?
Yeah, the question is sort of like, is there a way that you can speak to these folks in such a way to help them go towards maybe your film or something else to realize that these are not places that you should be taking your children?
Yes, there's actually studies that have been done that it's a lack of education because the children, the parents are bringing them to these places. They're not seeing them in their natural habitat, and they're doing things that they normally don't do. And especially when they're doing tricks, they don't do tricks out in the wild for entertainment and for food. And then what's really sad too is when what parents don't realize is when the show is over, they should just stay around and watch the animals. Then they'll see what it's really like. They're going out of their minds. There's nothing to do. It's the like in my film, like the aquarium film, I took I think it was 1 or 2 minutes. I don't even remember. And all I did was just showed what happens after, what happens most of the time. And this poor beluga was just swimming in circles over and over. And then you hear about the doctors and the scientists who research what these animals go through. They're going insane. They're suicidal. And so parents have to actually put their emotions aside and look at the literature and ask themselves, is this really education? And especially here in BC, it's almost embarrassing when you can just go out and see whales in their natural setting, and that's awe-inspiring. And you see them breach, and their fins are actually straight up, and you can hear them communicate because they always have something under the water. That's way better than going through an aquarium and talking about how many hot dogs did they eat for calories. There's no education. So parents have to kind of look at that, and I think parents are starting to get it. They're slowly getting it. We're starting to be informed now, and we've got Build S203, and there's more stuff coming. But yeah, they just have to really think about the animals, what they should do.
Thank you. Thank you. Amazing. All right, folks. So you can find out more about TerraLuv, the ethical fashion-based business, online fashion-based business, www.terraluv.com. That's TerraLuv.com. And you can check them out on Instagram there as well at TerraLuv Fashion. So TerraLuv Fashion on Instagram and TerraLuv.com online. All right, everybody, thank you so much for your time joining us for another episode of Veg Networking Canada. Today, we had the opportunity and the pleasure of speaking with the owner of TerraLuv, Gary Charbonneau. We look forward to seeing you all again on another episode of Veg Networking Canada. Until then, take care. Bye for now.